Alright guys, what is up? It's Mr. Blobfish here, and I'm here with another Rome 2 tier list video. So we're going to be ranking every faction. This is in 2022, and I've been playing for a pretty long time, so I'm going to start ranking these factions. And we're going to start with the Greek states. So first we have, and by the way, it's not going to be like this, I'm just doing this because I have a list here, by like their classification. So, Greek states, we have Athens. Hey, for Athens. Now, Athens is, it's a good unit. However, I find that they don't really have good, missile infantry. So, if I go to the Athens roster, which I'll pull up for you. This will be a long video anyway. Athens roster, Rome 2. Blah, 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 blah. So, yeah. They don't start off with the best, probably just some light peltists and archers. And I think there's a mercenary unit, I'm not 100% sure, but it's not like, you know, A tier best stuff in the world. You're not going to be working with the best of the best. You're going to be working with the meh, alright? So you have your light pelta slingers, and then you have your, I think your Rhodian slingers, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, they're okay. I'd say Athens, pretty defensive. I find them pretty shitty on offense. Land battles, I've almost never seen anybody use them on land battles, mostly just for siege battles. I find that I find that their just normal infantry doesn't really cut it. Their spear infantry is just like normal, and it's not B tier because I find that there's so many better options. I think it's C tier. I say Athens is C tier, right? So next we have Eparus. Eparus, I like Eparus. The Samnite warriors, I think it is. Those are pretty good. The Italian swordsmen are also great. You can only use 3 of them, but 6 units of infantry of those kinds are really good. If you're playing with cheaper land battles, it is, I wouldn't say, as good. But if you have a higher, like, how do I say this? If your land battle gives you more money, if the person who's hosting it has a lot of money, then it will be definitely in your interest to choose to go for those definitely better units. Their cavalry is okay. They're pikemen. They have some pretty good pikemen, so they're a very solid faction. I'd put them at solid B tier, if anything. Very good for land battles. For attacking on siege battles, you can get extremely creative with royal peltists. If you're doing the 1-2-4 rule, you can still like just as fine work it out. You just have to use a royal peltist really well because royal peltists are very strong, I find. So yeah, Eparus is still up there. Now, Masilia. Masilia has no special troops. They don't have any like nobles or nothing really special like Lucitane or Carthage even. So they don't really have anything special about them. They're just really normal, and I don't really like that. They really just have like Thoreo spears and thorax kind of guides. So if you're going to be doing any strategy, you're just going to be doing a line of spears and a line of thorax. Their archers are just mid. It's just a really mid faction, but it doesn't have anything special to set it apart. The Masilia cavalry isn't actually that bad. It's better than their citizens cav, I find, and most of the time I use it. It's not going to go good against any spear infantry, but if you get it into archers, it'll just absolutely melt them. And I also find that if their general is a cavalry unit, and they have low cavalry, you could probably as easily just flank them, and you can probably take out the general in like a minute. It's pretty good. However, Masilia is just not the best. I'm going to put it at C tier. It's just not the best faction. You can probably choose better, and for what it gives you, it's not really worth it. Thorax swords are not worth it if it's just all you have. Alright, and then next we have Sparta for our Greek states. So, Sparta, offensively, is kind of crap. Only if you're doing land battles and someone chooses Sparta, just pick anything with like heavy Syrian archers. Like any faction with heavy Syrian archers or Cretan archers, you will literally melt Sparta. Like most of their stuff is really reliant on defensive stuff, so spears and pikes, and you can basically melt those with archer fire. Their melee is not that good, and their archers they don't really have much good missile infantry too good. So they're a very good defensive faction. In fact, they're probably one of the best in siege assaults. If you're playing defensive Sparta, you literally just have to camp like a few places, and you'll win. You'll 100% win. It's really hard to kill Sparta. But however, offensively, it's not the best, but it can still work in land battles. So I'm gonna put it at a B tier. It's not gonna work in all situations, but it works pretty well in some. If that makes sense. Okay, Syracuse. So Syracuse, it's not a bad faction. I wouldn't call them like mega good in the campaign mode. If you're fighting as Carthage and if Rome declares war on you, mostly what I found is Syracuse starts to like fall apart from you, and try not to go to war with Syracuse if you're playing on that, because you will 100,000% lose. They have, I think, Thorax Swordsman is one of their units, and I think Hellenic Swordsman might be another one of their units. I'm not 100% sure. And then I think you get Cretan Archers. So they're not really good, but I found that they're very good defensively on siege battles. And I haven't really seen many people play it on land battles, probably because there's better options. But I'd give Syracuse a pretty good B rating. So that's probably going to do it for the Greek states. Now Rome. Just the Roman area. The Italians, because there's no really others. Unless you're playing with, I think, like, one of the DLCs. Rome is interesting. See, Rome is just broken. It's like full-on broken. You can't beat Rome, really, in anything else. And for that, because Rome is so broken, it's S tier. That's why nobody wants you to play Rome. If you're playing Rome, you're gonna win. Unless you mess up really badly. And I've messed up as Rome, so I can say that. So yeah, Rome is just broken, and kind of don't want to add to this list, so just imagine Rome's not there. Because basically, it's broken. It's just, they have so much stuff. Now, Gaelic tribes. We'll start with Arverni. Arverni is pretty good. I've seen in almost half of my siege battles someone goes this ambush faction, and for good reason. I mean, what's not to love? It's not a bad faction. There's nothing to hate about Arverni, honestly. Their roster is pretty good, actually. Oathsworn are great units. So, yeah, they have Oathsworn. I think they also have Celtic Warriors and Chosen Swordsmen, which are also really good. Celtic Warriors are a great meat shield. I think they might have Levy Freeman. Yeah, Levy Freeman. There's also very good meat shield units. I think they have Noble Horse, which is also great unit. And then decent spear infantry, mostly on their melee infantry. So it's a very solid faction. I'm going to put it at a solid A tier for that. So, what do we have next for our Gaelic tribes? Boii. Boii is also fairly good, I would say. Oathsworn, basically the same. Almost Naked Warriors. Axe Warriors. I don't think you have Chosen Swordsmen, though, so you only have Oathsworn. But you do have Sword Followers, and you have Celtic Warriors. So it is also fairly good. In the skirmishing department, not as good. And veteran spears are meh. I think they're kind of in the middle. I don't see people using that much, and usually use it for an attacking, not defensive. So it's okay. I would put it probably at also A tier. It's a pretty good ambush faction. You can't really go wrong with Boii. Galatia next. Well, Galatia, probably one of my favorites because of Galatian legionaries and also Galatian swords. They're really good. As a defensive faction, I've actually found in siege battles, the Galatian legionaries are really good, especially against some factions like Masilia, if people are using Masilia, because usually when I find people say no Rome, they either go Seleucids or Masilia. And it's pretty good against Masilia. I think I've had times with these, like, 2 units of Galatian swords held off, like, half of my army on a wall, so Galatia's pretty up there. Missile infantry is basically just nothing. They don't have really good missile infantry. It's mostly just, Celtic slingers. That's all you have to really work with, so pretty good defensively, And spear infantry is basically classic. It's not the best. And then their horses, noble horse, light horse. Light horse, meh. So, just because they're lacking just a tiny bit in some departments, I'll put them at B tier, but that doesn't mean that they're bad at all. Does not mean that they're bad. Alright. Now, the next people on our list is Nervii. Alright. Nervii... I'm not much of a Nervii fan. I've played Nervii in land battles. I find a lot of people are very obsessed with Nervii. It's probably because their melee rosters and bad Celtic warriors, Oathsworn, naked swords, and guerrilla swordsmen, obviously. Naked swords, usually in land battles, people just use them as cannon fodder and just throw them out into the battle and just pray that they die. And I usually find that they're very good counter charge. So if people are charging you, if they have charge bonus, if people are using, I think a lot of ambush factions have the frenzy charge or whatever. Usually, the only way you really counter that is counter charging it, and naked swords are pretty good counter charges. Missile infantry, they do have Gaelic hunters, which is a good archer unit to use, and basically that's it. I mean, you do have noble horse and mighty horse. So yeah, it's in the middle, but I would say that for land battles it's better, but I wouldn't say for siege it isn't. Nobody really goes Nervii for siege, I find, and that's probably because you don't have anything like really out there. Like, I don't know, they don't only have access to tortoises, obviously, and they're kind of just mid. They're just mid. Next faction on our great mighty list after Nervii, we're all done with those. Germanic tribes. And Swaby is the only Germanic tribe that we have. Now Swaby, interesting. You get wolf warriors, sword masters, and round shield swordsmen, and hex bearers, which are all decent, but I never find that if you're facing off against any kind of Greek faction that they don't do really well in. Wadana spears, I think they're called Wadana spears. Those are, and spearwomen are pretty good units defensively. Like, they find that they're not really good offensively. They barely get any kills. They get like 42. So in land battles, siege battles, I've never really used Swaby in siege battles. I've never seen people use it in siege battles. And I don't really like the faction. I don't like how it plays. I find that all of their units are just kind of throwaway, just pray that they live units. I find that you're usually just gonna have to work with like the warrior, like commander ability or whatever it's called, to use their war cry to get the best effect, or you could use a strategist to get second wind. But I'm not a fan. Don't find it good. It's my personal opinion, so I can say that. And I think that it's C tier. I don't think that it's all the hype that some people say. That's just Germanic tribe and it's great. Eastern empires, we have Armenia. This is one of probably my top 10 land battle factions. Really, really good. I think Cavalry. Cavalry is not bad for Armenia. They have a decent amount of missile cav, decent amount of shock cav. Good, Royal Cataphracts, probably the best. Noble horse archers, you know. Eastern spearmen and Persian hoplites. I have a thing about Persian hoplites. They're actually good. They're good for holding against people. So if you have, I always put Persian hoplites if I have like a few extra gold. I take some Persian hoplites, and the reason is I protect my archers because they hold. They actually hold pretty well. I was very surprised. I think one of my channels and one of my videos I actually have some Persian hoplites holding, but I've had times where they literally just like hold for a good like 5 minutes, and it's very useful. And they get like a good 42 kills, which is not that good, respectively, but for such a crappy cheap unit, it is pretty useful to have. They have Eastern elite Persian archers, so pretty good, and then the Hillman is meh. It's meh. You can deal with Hillman. It's mostly meant for their cavalry, but because of that, it is bad. Is pretty good. So I'm gonna put it A tier for land battle. For siege battle, it's pretty bad. So yeah, actually I'm gonna say B tier because of siege battle, and I want to include that too. Just a quick swap right there. All right. Now Parthia is next. Parthia is the bane of all land battle like existence. The amount of missile cavalry that Parthia has is just like it makes your brain want to explode. Their spear infantry is crap. Alright? Their melee infantry is crap. But everything else is insane. Like elite Persian archers and Persian light and Parthian foot archers, not bad, meh. Elite Persian archer is probably the best you can get, and literally all I see people do is they just make a line of like Eastern Spearmen or Persian hoplites, and then they just put some really good archers behind it, and then they just have missile cav, and they'll wreck any army. They literally will just manage their cav, and they'll go everywhere and destroy you. And for that reason, they're A tier. They're solid A tier. Like, yes, they suck in siege battles, but a Parthia player could easily wreck you in a lot of stuff. Like, they will demolish you. You will be sad if you're in a land battle with a good Parthia player. They can manipulate it to hell's extent. I don't know how you do it, but you Parthia players are pretty good. Pontus? Pontus is underrated in my opinion. I think Pontus has a very special place in my heart. Pontic swordsmen, I think, are a very nice unit, and hillmen work pretty well. Pontic peltists aren't, nah, they're mad, but they do have Eastern archers, which isn't bad. And their pikemen units, bronze shield pikemen, are okay. The rail spears obviously are pretty good too, and Eastern spearmen are crappy, but they do have noble blood cavalry, so I do like their roster. They also have chariots, which could be useful in some land battles if you know how to use them properly. And for that reason, I put Pontus probably at B tier. It's meh. It's in the middle. It's okay. It's not the best. All right. Solid okay. Right. Very underrated. And if you're a good Pontic player, I've been with Pontus players in siege battles, and I once got like when I in early game I got wiped, and this Pontus player 2v1 Rome and Carthage with 124. He soloed them basically. I had like 2 units of archers and he soloed them. So a good Pontic player could be an A tier, but for a normal Pontic player it's a B tier. Alright? Now we have our Balkan tribes, which is Ardae. I don't know. I usually just see this in the grand campaign. I wouldn't call them mega good, to be honest. I mean, their roster's kind of crap, and most of their stuff is either overpriced or can just be easily outrun. And for that reason, they're C tier. Nobody plays this faction. I don't know why you're playing this faction. They have literally no missile infantry. Their melee infantry is just awful. Illyrian levies, why? General units are meh. And they just have a bunch of spear infantry. So unless you want to play land battle and just sit in a corner and just let your spear infantry die, then you play this faction. But other than that, it's D tier, and I don't like it. Simple, my opinion, I do not care what you guys have to say. Getae. Getae is actually pretty good. I found some very good Getae land battle players. I've had Getae players that I've seen them ruin Rome. Spear infantry is good. Missile infantry is also pretty good. Dacian heavy bowmen, pretty good. They have noble swords, I think, which is not bad. So I would say I'd say they don't have a good roster, but they don't have a bad roster. I'd give them C tier. They could be B tier, but they're C tier. Alright? You need to be pretty good to play them. And then we have Adrisian Kingdom. Interesting faction, in my opinion. I've had times where I've seen Adrisian players just wreck people in siege battles. Their missile infantry is very peltist oriented, but they do have Thracian warriors and Thracian nobles, which a lot of people are like, oh, those are cannon fodder. You literally can just take some archers and shoot the absolute crap out of them. But I find that they have pretty good attack damage, and though their armor's low, they can do a lot, especially against Kush. They could absolutely demolish Kush sometimes if you use them right defensively and offensively. Spears are pretty crap, so I'd say that they're C tier because of their roster. They could be B tier if you're good. So same with Getae and Adrisian Kingdom. You can be great, but you can also be crap. Now Tylus, the bane of Macedon's existence in the Grand Campaign. They have a better roster. It's basically the Adrisian Kingdom with a better roster, and for that reason, they're better. However, I find that they're a little bit overpriced in some areas, and the Thracian Warriors aren't always worth it. You have to be pretty skilled to use Tylus, so I'd say that they're also C tier. Actually, no. Well, they do have Oathsworn, so yeah, they are B tier. You have to play with high money though if you're gonna play those. So it's B tier. All right. Done with our Balkan tribes, let's go to our Iberian tribes, the Arvaci. Well, the Arvaci are basically just the Lucitane, but worse. I've played a few battles with the Arvaci. They can be really good, but their armor is very lacking. And they don't have special units. They have noble fighters, they have guerrilla warriors, On any siege battle, you'll just lose instantly. Their armors isn't enough. You really just need to use it on land battles, and for land battles, you need to be using a treed-up map, something with like cover and stuff for your enemies. And I don't really find them nice. They need more attack damage in some of the units. They just need more, and they're C tier for me. And then next, one of my favorite factions is Lucitane. And a lot of people are like, oh, you just raided Aravaci, and Lucitane is basically the same. Wrong. Lucitani nobles and veteran shield warriors make the perfect combination. It's a literal broken faction, and if you're a good Lucitani player, you will absolutely demolish. You will wreck people instantaneously. There's nothing you can do against a good Lucitani player. Like nothing. A good Lucitani player will defeat Rome. They'll defeat Bactria. I don't know. They'll defeat anyone. They'll defeat Kush, because the amount of damage that Lucitani does is insane. You can get good flanking. Their cavalry, yes, okay, they get obliterated by archers. In land battles, if you can just destroy people's archers, you basically win. The amount of attack damage these people have is insane, and they're solid A tier and they could be S tier. Like they're literally on crack cocaine. And when you fight these guys in the grand campaign, it's almost impossible because they basically just like use archers on a hill and then they charge you and you're dead. All right. So let's see. What do we have next? Our successor kingdoms from Alexander the Great. First, we have Bactria. It's solid. Bactria's solid. The Grand Campaign is great. I think that's one of the reasons that I like them a lot. Thorax swords and hillmen for melee infantry is meh. You have an Indian armored elephant for a general, which is pretty good. Pilotless units and East elite Persian archers as missile units. Thorax pikemen and normal pikemen are pretty decent. The rail spears are decent. It's very decent. It's B tier. It can be C tier though sometimes. I feel like sometimes they're not so special, but Missile Cav makes it special. And if you do some pretty good, you can do some pretty good elephant plays. Hope that makes sense. And we're almost done to the end of this list. Macedon. Macedon is very good in my opinion. I've people that play Macedon. They can be very good offensively, very good defensively. Thorax pikemen and royal peltas are really your only gambit for melee infantry, but thorax swords can work with what they have. Only normal archers, but they do have thorax pikemen, which is pretty decent, and foot companions, which are insanely great. And then they do have shield bearers, which is a pretty good spear infantry. And I'd say they're A tier. They don't have a really good roster, like not mega, not insanely big, insanely good. All the stuff is great, but they're good. They are good. And I like Macedon. I think they're really good on land battles. I think they're very good on defensive, offensive, and I think they're very rad. And I think they're A tier. Egypt is next. I played the Egypt Grand Campaign. I played it a lot. I really like their roster. Their roster is massive. It's very fun to play as. The Royal Thorax Swords, I'm sorry. The Royal Thorax Swords are great. Sobek Cultists are pretty fun to use. Galatian Royal Guard are just really cool. You get Nubian Bowmen, which are pretty damn good too, and Hellenic Royal Guard. And they are also A tier. For that reason. And then lastly, we have the Seleucids, S tier, just insanely cool. Silver Shield Bearers. I think you have one of the best pike units in the game. I think that's the Silver Shield Pikemen. It's just such a good faction. Insane amounts of melee cavalry, insane amount of missile cavalry. The amount of generals you can have, different types are insane. You get chariots, you get elephants. I think you even get, not 100% sure. I think you might get tortoises with the Seleucids. I'm not 100% sure. Just a really good faction. It's S tier. It can defeat Rome. It's almost good in any type of situation. I love the Seleucids. They're a very good faction. Now you have the Britannic Tribes, which is only one. The Iceni, dog do. Why are you playing Iceni, man? There's so many other ambush factions. They're so much better. Then there's Carthage. I'd say it's A tier. It can get defeated easily. I mean, you're really only working with like Libyan infantry. You have some other noble fighters and whatnot. Actually, I'll put it S tier. Because if you get the DLCs, it's worth it. But when you have no DLCs, Carthage basically just becomes awful. I feel like you need some of the DLCs for the Sacred Band and stuff like that, which are pretty good. So yeah. I think Carthage is really good. I don't really have much to say about it. So yeah. Black Sea Colonies, also a DLC faction. Cimmeria, Chimeria, whatever the hell you want to call it. Meh. It's just meh. It's just meh. It's just D. I'm not even gonna go on it. It's just a bunch of spear infantry and a little shitty battle infantry. It's not really worth it. Colchis, just why? Just why? No. No, nobody goes Colchis. I've never seen a player go Colchis. It's not good. Pergamon. Okay, Pergamon is actually a good faction in my opinion. I think Pergamon is kind of nice to play. The roster isn't bad with spear infantry and missile infantry, and they're a very good builder faction for the Grand Campaign. For land battles, they can also be pretty good with cheap. If you're playing a cheap land battle, Pergamon's the way to go. I'll give them B tier. Never use them in siege. Simple as that. Now, the nomadic factions. If you like the actually no wait, Desert Kingdoms. Desert Kingdoms are probably the best DLC you can get. The Desert Kingdoms DLC, probably the best in the world, and I don't even really need to look at any of these statistics to show you about this. Kush is S tier. The amount of armor piercing these factions have is insane. The amount of armor is insane. Like armored Chotel warriors, just freaking Chotel warriors. I think they have Kushite royal archers. They have a bunch of slave infantry, which is super useful for meat shields. It's insane. Masilia, A tier. They have slave infantry. They have Roman inspired units that work with Testedo. Also great. Saba, B tier. I like Saba. I think Saba is a very fun faction to play. Their campaign is very hard, but it's very fun. You get really interesting melee infantry. You get pretty good missile infantry. You get interesting spear infantry. You get a lot of melee cavalry, and you get armored camel spearmen and armored camel archers. And I think you even get camel cataphracts, which are insanely good. Nabatea. Also, pretty good. I put that at A tier. I've seen people use Nabatea in all types of ways and shapes and forms. They work really well. I think they also have Nabatea and Noble Cavalry is pretty good, and they also have armored camel spearmen. So those are also very good. And lastly, the one thing that nobody likes, nobody should like, nobody should ever like. These guys all go here. You might be wondering why I put the Roxolani here. It's literally the only faction I see people put play at least once, and for that reason, actually no, it's B. They all suck. If you play them, you're awful. You suck at the game. You're not good at all. You probably think you are. You think you're being special. They're not fun to play as. If you're going, you can't even play them in siege battles. Basically, if you use these defensively or offensively, you need to have like I don't know siege towers or anything. You're gonna do nothing. It's just literally just horse spam. Most useless DLC. Don't buy it. Not worth it at all. It's just shitty in every single way. It's not worth it. Do not play these factions. Never play these factions. And if you play these factions, don't talk to me. That's the final chart. I hope you like it. These are my top 10 S tiers. Think that these are not here. In C tier, they can be B or A tier if you're good. But for the base player, there's your. And Saba could probably go down. Pergamon could probably go down. So that's it. I hope you enjoy, and that's my ranking. Goodbye.